Sweet. Lieve, you and I had the wonderful chance to meet at AFP Icon in New Orleans this year, where you gave a great talk on messaging and strengths-based communication, particularly, which is something I'm really passionate about. But now your work is moving in a little bit of a different direction. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that? What's the problem you solve, and what is the transformation people get out of working with you or engaging with your stuff?
Thanks so much, Zach, and thanks for inviting me to this great mind meld. Yeah, so the problem that I have seen time and time again working in strategy consulting, really across all sectors for more than a dozen years, is this gap between people being stuck in a hustle culture and not actually moving the needle on their biggest goals. So that's where my passion area really is, just like the strengths-based approach that we were doing at FP Icon. Um, I love helping people find solutions to have a more joyful workflow so they can be much more productive without sacrificing their relationships or their well-being.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know that there are a lot of people listening and in my audience who are founders. They've got great ideas. There's a lot of energy behind the idea, but they feel stuck and like they're spinning their wheels because they're working all the time, but they're certainly thinking about it all the time. But their biggest goals aren't necessarily, they're not getting any closer to them. So, what are some symptoms that you see that lets you know that people are really spinning their wheels or they're really stuck? What does that problem look like for people?
Uh, and it's such a common problem. I really just want to say that at the top. Like that's how I got into this work. Um, was seeing people at very high level points in their career from an early age, um, continuing to struggle in making traction on their goals. And it often looks like getting sucked into these workflow swirls where there are so many different tasks. I call it task mode because your brain is literally in a different state when you're toggling between tasks, kind of like a computer, versus flow mode when you're calmly focused, your nervous system is calm and centered. It's a totally different brain mode. And so what happens a lot is as more and more things get put onto your plate, as a founder, you have to do everything. Then it's harder and harder to remind your brain to get out of that task mode, which sucks a lot of energy, a lot more cognitive energy than people think, and get into flow mode where you can be much more effective in terms of relationship building, doing business strategy. You need to be in flow mode, creating powerful messaging or content. You need to be in flow mode. And of course, really connecting with donors.
Well, I'm sure that that's not a problem anyone can relate to, right? I hear you when you say that's such a common problem, and I feel like I was trying to think, who do I know with that problem? And then I thought, I don't know if I know anyone who hasn't at least at one time experienced that problem. I want to get into a little bit about who you are and how you approach the work and how you get into it, but let me ask something first. Um, a lot of like executive directors of small shops, especially a lot of people that I work with, a lot of people in the audience here, they feel like they don't have any control over their schedule or their workflow because their board expects this and they have to run here and they have to run there. And task switching is, almost a bit of an understatement, right? They're just constantly pulled in so many different directions and they feel like they don't have any control over that. How do you get them to take control of that workflow and design something that works for them?
So there are a lot of tricks, but one of the very best principles for getting that, what I call freedom in your schedule, so that you have a feeling of control, even while balancing all those outside responsibilities. Um, it's deceptively simple, Zach, but it's literally visualizing your week, your day, and your month. When you can take a step back and pause and get out of the day-to-day hustle, hour to hour sometimes,
Yeah.
if you're toggling between different meetings and demands, and really carve out, it only takes about 20 minutes a week, but take that step back so you can kind of see all the Tetris pieces. You can visualize it. You might want to talk through it if you are more of a verbal processor. And if you're a tactile person like me, you'll definitely want to handwrite, so you can kind of see where your time is going. It's absolutely critical. And when you can do that, you mentioned board meetings. I know how stressful board meetings are because um, I work with a lot of clients actually who will ping me a couple of hours before a board meeting. And, you know, you can be so much more effective with your time when you see that your board meeting is coming 6 weeks from now. And you take those 20 minutes, kind of plan out what those dependencies are, give yourself that margin and space, knowing some things might take a little time, and proactively communicate to your board chair kind of what's going on way ahead of time. It's a lot easier to like change an agenda or figure out something 3 weeks before the board meeting opposed to 3 days.
Yeah. You touched on being proactive, and I think that's what I'm hearing from you is that to really take control, we can't be reacting to everything, right? When these emails come in or this thing gets lit on fire or these board, responsibilities get thrown on us last minute, we can't just react to everything. It's not the job of a founder or an executive director just to be fielding everything. I mean, in some parts, but your job is to be steady, right? And to cast a vision, and to steer the ship. And so you have to be centered in yourself to do that. I want to talk a lot more about that and how to practically do it. But why don't we take a second? Tell me just a little bit about who you are, Lieve, and how you got into this work. What interests you about it, and why is it important?
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate that, Zach. I've been so passionate about nonprofits since college. I wrote my senior thesis on the importance of vision casting for uniting people around a common cause and making a really big difference. And as I said, when I was working with executives, I started working right out of college at a big consulting firm that was all the things like a full service boutique consulting. So for some clients, I ghost wrote books for them for marketing. For other clients, I did development strategy, just all of the gamut. And it was a wonderful opportunity to work with Fortune 500 executives directly, to be doing research with some big foundations and to see that there were still these common pain points when it came to workflow. And that's when I got hooked in my personal interests around positive psychology. I was working with some folks on decision-making psychology in business and how to apply that for more effective decision-making, and started seeing the power of strengths-based psychology and how you can apply that to help like trick your brain into doing its best work.
What do you mean by
Yeah, and
trick
today
your
I
brain?
continue to work with nonprofits, more one-on-one, and the tricking your brain is kind of putting it into a positive state to get you ready to do your best work. So it depends. It really depends on the type of work that you're trying to do. But one very little known fact is your anterior cingulate cortex like creates these memories and emotions based on previous work habits and patterns. So if you have a negative experience, let's say struggling to write your annual report, I think is a really very common example. It can feel so overwhelming when you first realize you have to write an annual report, all the things, so much responsibilities on the line. Let's say you have a negative experience, you feel kind of rushed, you didn't like how it turned out. Your body remembers that, and your brain remembers that at a deeper level than your executive function, your prefrontal cortex. So the next year when you go to do your annual report, if you're not really careful and intentional about putting yourself in a positive state, you're going to sit down to write your report and feel kind of yucky, kind of anxious. You might feel a pit in your stomach, your shoulders might hunch in. It's from this old somatic memory from the previous work stress. And why should people in the nonprofit space care about this? Nonprofits is all about excitement and energy. And as you just said, a founder has to be that positive visionary who's galvanizing everyone. So founders really don't have enough time to waste getting stuck in those old negative patterns, because I think you probably know it just it has that ripple effect to other people in the organization.
Yeah. I read somewhere, I don't remember where this study was or where I found it or something, but it was talking about how like 80 to 90% of executives, whether it's in the C-suite or nonprofit EDs, things like that, um, feel, oh, you know what? Sorry. Let me reframe that. I don't remember what the statistic was, but it was like the majority of C-suite executives or EDs spend like 80% of their days just combating thought loops. Not necessarily just
Mm-hmm.
negative thoughts. For me, that's what it looks like. I have a lot of negative thought loops, if we're being honest. But for a lot of people, it's just like trying to get your brain straight so that you can like take the next step forward. Um, and I just remember thinking, I'm great. I'm glad I'm not the only one, but man, this is such a huge, almost like cultural, societal kind of problem. What do we do about it? Thank God there's people like you. So really cool. I know that a big thing that, as we're talking about, like you gave the image of people's shoulders hunching over and just people having that like somatic memory. A lot of people have tough experiences or just a tough time around asking, whether it's asking for money, of course, but asking for volunteers, asking for help. Just what is it to you about asking that is so difficult for people?
Zach, this is such a great question. And I just want to acknowledge as well, even earlier this week, I was speaking with leaders of big nonprofits who've been asking their whole career and having the same conversation. How can we make it more fun, more exciting? So it's it's really wonderful if you can accelerate your own learning process by reframing the ask now, especially if you're a founder, because it's going to be paying you dividends for the whole rest of your career. It's, we always have to be asking in order to do any type of business development and bring people under our umbrella and the cause. So yeah, one of the most common challenges that I see when coaching people on making the ask solicitation training is they see it as almost like begging, right? Begging for a gift. And that kind of puts you in this, as you said, a really negative posture, even if you're not taking on that posture physically. That mindset of begging or needing help, it somehow indicates that you're not enough. Whereas really when you're approaching an ask from a culture of philanthropy, really promoting the joy of giving, and I'm sure that your listeners know this, that philanthropy, the root word is philia, love, and anthropy, anthropos, people. It's love of people. You're inviting people to express their love of other people, whether it's gratitude for a physician who really helped them heal in a deep way, or excitement and joy for a previous mentor. I'm sure you know this, people give to people. So the love has to be a part of your process in asking somebody for a gift, whether it's time, talent, treasure, or testimony. And that's where taking a few moments to get really present. I encourage a lot of heart-centered breathing. Feel the love and passion for what you're doing before you even walk in the room, pick up the phone, write the email is absolutely critical to putting you in that positive state where you can be spreading the love of giving.
Yeah. I love your angle on that about how people give to people. And so it's not really optional in terms of effective fundraising for love and joy and just energy and excitement to be part of the process. You have to have that. That's not just a sign of a great fundraiser. That's just a sign of someone who fundraises at all,
It's in
especially
the
in
definition.
yeah, exactly. And especially, I mean, I think I heard Seth Godin say once, like in today's world, people are just longing for someone they can trust and to have connection real, genuine connection with people, not with just businesses and capital B brands, whatever. And so fundraising, it's no different, right? People give to people that they know, that they like, that they trust. And more than that, they contribute to a shared vision of the future, right? And that's why the vision is so
Yes, I'm
important.
so glad that you said that, because I do coach really a 3-step framework and the presencing is the first one. So it's when you're approaching this work for making an ask, presence, purpose, and then passion. You want to start with that presence moment where you get into that heart-centered space. Then the purpose is also really key, right? If you don't have a clear sense of what your request is, what the need is, what the impact is going to be of someone giving their funds or even their time, you're not going to feel great either, right? It really helps you to have a clear sense of it's not just that the organization needs this, but we need it to do in order to make this level of change, right? How that purpose of this gift fits into the broader vision that you're running forward with as the leader of your nonprofit. And then the third piece is passion. You want to sustain that passion so your prospect continues to feel it. It's actually very related to what we were talking about earlier. You want them to have a positive memory of an interaction. And you probably know that when our brain makes memories, it's not perfect. It's definitely not picture perfect. And we usually retain that somatic feeling from the end of a conversation that influences how our hippocampus codes the rest of the memory. So you want to make sure you're finishing your conversations by reconnecting to your passion and your donor's passion, hopefully a shared passion about your mission and vision for impact.
Yeah. Leva, I love how you bring like things that we oftentimes hear a lot of, maybe in folklore, just things that we just say a lot in the industry, and you tie them with like actual science and psychology, maybe just because you're using big words, but I don't know, it sounds super credible. I'm curious, like, I've been a teacher in a lot of different aspects, and even now in the coaching consulting I do, I think about it like teaching. And so a good framework is the core of all great teaching. How did you develop your 3P framework? Is there another name for it?
Yeah, there is another name for it. I
Okay,
call
not the
it
three
the
P's.
the creative flow formula, and it's a formula that you can apply to different types of work where you want to be really focused and in the flow, like we talked about earlier. Content creation, meaningful conversations, strategy. It's really that difference between getting out of your task mode and getting into more strategic focus. And gosh, I've almost been developing it my whole career, but really what happened to me, Zach, 6 years ago, um, I I was so overwhelmed and such a high achiever, doing all of the things, working, totally caught in hustle culture, that I actually developed chronic debilitating headaches. And what happened with that is, in order to sustain my career, I had to get all my work done at least twice as fast as all my colleagues, because pretty much any day between noon and 2 p.m., I was under such chronic stress that I would get a debilitating headache and I had to wish the rest of my day away. So I developed this by studying a lot of applied neuroscience and getting a coach certification in that, and then pulling this research together, really translating these scientific principles into something that I could use to make sure I could complete a full workday between 9 a.m. and noon. And after doing that for a few years, that's when I started teaching it and sharing it with others. And I'm really happy to share that what's the best part of the whole story for me is, after a couple of months when I figured this out, I don't have headaches anymore, maybe once or twice a whole year.
Wow. Okay. Well, okay. I need to hire you. That's the move. That's I'm glad that you mentioned that. I appreciate you being open about sharing that. When I started what is now my business, um, I would get these like horrible muscle spasms like in my stomach. And I had no idea what was going on. I was like allergic to oatmeal suddenly after all these, like I had no idea. And went to doctors and got all these tests, and every doctor would just be like, bro, you're a little stressed out, aren't you? And I'd be like, Yes, but why is this happening to me and not to all these other people?" And I remember one of my doctors said, "It is. Like it is happening to a lot of people. We are so stressed that we're just taking it out on our bodies and damaging our bodies and damaging just our mind and our energy and not living the life that I feel like we're meant to live, when we're in those conditions." Is that something that you see a lot? Is like that somatic connection with people?
Definitely. And I'm so glad that you shared that story, because I don't think we have a culture where we can share these stories, but it's under the surface.
Yeah.
And so people don't know. And what breaks my heart about it so much, Zach, is that if you're the leader of your organization, you are the linchpin, and you really can't afford to let yourself be in that state of chronic stress. Um, and it's counterintuitive, right? Because you want to respond and be there for people in the moment, but by doing that, you can degrade your health up to these really extreme levels over time. I know people who have fainted at their desk right in the middle of work. I have another co-founder friend of mine who developed really debilitating brain spasms by just overworking. And you don't want to work yourself into that space, because that really constrains you from doing your work. So it's a very key piece of the creative flow formula, and my whole approach is to make sure you can be doing your best work while lowering that chronic stress load.
Yeah. Okay. So the three P's are presence, purpose. What was the third one?
Passion.
Passion. Okay. I was like, I know it's not profit. Okay.
It
It's purpose, passion. I love
leads to profit, but
Yeah. There's a like fourth P in parentheses there. Um, what is the first step someone can take if someone is completely overwhelmed? They're like, Leva, I don't even know how to make heads or tails out of anything I'm doing right now. What's the first step you would recommend someone taking to get control over their workflow and kind of enter into this process?
I'm calming. Yeah. So when I first work with people, I actually take them through a complimentary consult. Sometimes it could be 15 minutes. Sometimes it's gone as long as 2 hours. But the purpose of that is to really take that step back, take a hot breath, and look at all of your different life areas, your goals, and how you're spending your time. So we walk through what's working now, in how you're spending your time, how you would like to be spending your time, and figure out a game plan to make that happen with a couple of quick wins, also a couple of longer term pieces, because making these kinds of shift as we're talking about, you want it to happen unconsciously in your brain at that deep level. So your limbic system changes. And it's really hard to get out of task mode and hustle culture. It's not like a switch. It can take people days or weeks. It actually takes the brain a minimum of 63 days to create an automatic habit, to kind of do that rewiring. Um, and that's if you're really, really good at it. So it takes most people a whole quarter to make these kinds of seismic shifts. And now, if you don't have the time to give me a call, what I would recommend in like a pinch for a really quick win, if you're stuck, taking a moment, closing your eyes, and just ask yourself, um, how can I make this next task or this next donor call or whatever it is? How can I make this as fun as possible? And kind of wave your magic wand and really think, like, what would my dream work scenario be? Zach, you know that um, I'm about to publish a book. I just sent it to my editor for the final proofreading a couple of days ago. When I started out to write the book, I did this exercise thinking, like, what would make the book writing process as dreamy as possible? And when I closed my eyes, I kept envisioning working outside on the beach. And I don't live near a beach, but I did find an app I could put on my phone that would make sounds like the ocean waves. So when I worked on my book, it was so enjoyable, and I always felt great about it because I was listening to the ocean.
Yeah. Wow. I love how you find a way to immerse yourself in a place, I guess you could say, without being there. I'm an avid language learner, and I think that's something we say in the language community a lot is like
Mm.
you can learn by immersion without going to the place. There are other ways to immerse yourself. And so that's cool. There are ways to immerse yourself in what you need to raise your spirits and raise your vibration and have a lot of fun while you're doing it. I just want to maybe this is a good place for us to kind of wrap up on an ending note. Why, we touched on this a little bit before, but I think it's important for me to hear. I think it's important for a lot of people to hear. Why is it so important to enjoy what you're doing and to bring fun and an element of play into what you're doing? Why does that? I'm someone who, like, in the past, I'd be like, you don't have to love what you do, you just got to do it. There's an element of that that's true, but talk to me, convince me a little bit more for my own sake. Why is fun and play so important in everything that we do?
I wrote a whole book about it, so you could read the whole book. But in particular, for your audience and for founders, you're creating something new out of nothing. And if you want it to have that energy where it builds momentum and creates a whole movement, whether it's in truly deeply at a personal level impacting the people you serve at that heart level, or if it's in getting your volunteers to give their time and talents at a level of excellence, or connecting with your donors to give their resources purely for the joy of it, you have to be a living embodiment of that joy while you're doing your work. It attracts and it creates that spiraling effect. And I think, like you said, everybody knows how painful and challenging it can be. Of course, we can't be joyful all the time, but when we're not centered in that place of joyful work, we begin to really limit our creative thinking. And I mean, the simple answer is studies show your productivity. You feel more productive in your brain, but you're 4 to 5 times less productive in reality. And
Wow.
if you're a founder, you just can't afford that.
Yeah, if you're like 20% as productive, not just as you could be, but as you think you're being, like that's crazy. Okay, well, that certainly answered the question. I love it. I love that what you know, if you project love and joy and inspiration and generosity, you're going to attract that back to you. And of course, that
Mhm.
doesn't just reflect on you, not just your organization, but just the people that you serve and the impact that you were called to make. I love how closely you tie, our inner state and our workflow to actually accomplishing the mission and having the impact that we're meant to have in the world. I think that's really cool. Okay, so if people want to give you a call, if they want to keep their eyes out for the book, if they just want to stalk you and your stuff, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website, my personal website is presentandproductive.com. Lieve Hendren again is my name, but I love using that website moniker, presentandproductive.com, because I think it speaks to the type of productivity that we all need to have. So welcome, of course, your listeners to reach out, and I'll be launching the book next month.
Whoa, so soon. Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay. This is very cool. Certainly send me a form to pre-order it, and I certainly will. And I definitely encourage everyone
I
else
will.
out there to get it too, because Leva, we haven't known each other for that long, but every conversation we have, I feel like I learn a lot and I get so much value. I'm sure that book is just going to be fire. So I'll definitely include a link to your website and everything in the caption description wherever this video goes. Yeah. Anything else that you want to leave us with on an ending note?
I just want to say thank you. Your passion and vision and excitement, for serving your folks the sector and really making a difference in how we can work better as nonprofit leaders is truly inspiring. So it's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Awesome. Feelings mutual. Thanks, Lieve.